if Mr. Christopher Hitchens considers himself a happy person, which among alcohol's many charms is that which most appeals to him, and if drink has played any role in saving him from Jesus in the fashion that Jesus saves others from drink.
Well, my favorite miracle in the New Testament is, of course, the one at Cana, which is a tribute, actually, to a thing that's very often overlooked, which is the influence of Hellenism and the Greek style in Palestine in those days. I mean, the tributes paid to wine. That's what the Passover Seder is borrowed from the Platonic Symposium. Wisdom and happiness are supposed to come to you when you're lying comfortably around with a glass of wine. It is one of the very few charms of Christianity that it doesn't repudiate that. A lot of its Protestant adherents do, of course, and of course the Muslims do. But I've often asked myself if happiness is what I'm interested in. I mean, if it's what I want, I think I'd rather say I'm looking for satisfaction rather than happiness. And whenever you ask if you're happy, as you probably know if you've ever tried it, you're about to make the discovery that perhaps not as much as you thought you were, or you wouldn't be asking. The mind is on such a knife edge. I don't think I can say much more. I'd have to say so much more than that if I've said any more, so I'll stop. Except for, as for the drink, I don't know why the word is out, you know, that I sort of can't manage without a glass in hand. I can take a cocktail if I have to, and I think it's certainly very rude to refuse it if it's offered. And I think that food tastes much better with wine. I think a meal without wine is like a day without sunshine. But I live in Washington, D.C., where 2 glasses of white wine at lunch would be considered an unbelievable debauch. So it doesn't take much to get a reputation for being a boozer around these parts.
Back to the New Yorker profile from last year. Your wife said to the author of this, Blue said to me once in a while it seems like he might be drunk. Aside from that, even though he's obviously an alcoholic, he functions at a really high level and doesn't act like a drunk. Again, this is coming from your wife. So the only reason it's a bad thing is it's taking out his liver, presumably. It would be a drag for Henry Kissinger to live to 100 and Christopher to keel over next year. Hitchens, too, brought up the topic of alcohol before I did, the writer. You're going to want to talk about this, said, not wrongly, pointing at his glass. A writer likes a cooperative subject, but it can be disrupting to make a portrait in the shadow of a gigantic self-portrait. He was not a piss artist, he explained, someone who can't get going without a load of beer, who's a drunk, overconfident, and flushed. I can't bear that. He went on, I know what I'm doing with it, and I can time it. It's a self-medicating thing. It says also that when Mel Gibson was arrested, your comment was, and he blew a .12 in the breathalyzer, that's as sober as you'd ever want to be.
Yes, charming. My wife doesn't touch the stuff, so she doesn't know anything about alcohol at all. And my doctor just says that either people are slandering me or I've got something miraculous going on with my liver, because he says it oughtn't to be true how good it is. The thought, though, that Carol puts in about it would be terrible to be outlived by Kissinger or others for any reason at all is very much with me. So what I really need to do is lose some weight. As you can, I'm sure, and all your audience can see, I've been getting away with murder for years, but just not taking any exercise at all. I think that's where I ought to probably haul up my slacks a bit.
Do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
No. No. I mean,
Have you had a
I'm not
drink
even sure.
today?
I'm not even sure there is such a thing. That may be all sort of cultish hooey, the Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous stuff. If I see someone, lying on the street, smelling and unable to move, and so I'm not sure that person's an alcoholic. They may be trying to drink themselves to death or be on the way towards doing so. If I was told I couldn't have a drink for the rest of today, I would feel slightly uncomfortable. But it wouldn't be at all difficult for me to get through it, or indeed for the rest of the week. I remember a very annoying week in Libya once, where I hadn't been able to smuggle any booze in and couldn't get any homemade brew from the Palestinians there as I had been able to previously. That's a week I wouldn't terrifically want to go through again.
Have you had a drink today?
No.
Next call for Christopher Hitchens, Huntersville, North Carolina.
Hello?
You're on the
No,
air.
but I would have done if it wasn't for you. It's already 3 o'clock. I would have had one before lunch, yes. Excuse me.
Go ahead, caller.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say that after the 2004 elections, I kind of wrote off God, or the ABC elementary version that we're taught here in the U.S. The pain was just too much, and I refuse to delude myself to that point again. God, I've forgotten everything.
Caller, what's your question for Mr. Hitchens?
Well, my question is basically when and how did he write off God?
And caller, do you consider yourself an atheist today?
No, I don't consider myself an atheist. I believe there's something out there in line with the universe. You know, I can't really say that. I can't believe we're here alone by ourselves with each other 100%. I can't believe that. 'Cause
Okay.
that's too much.
It is. I mean, it is rather a bleak thought. The problem is that you mustn't catch yourself disbelieving things because you might not want them to be true, or believing things because you might like them to be true. The other example, I should have mentioned it when you asked me about the billion believers in the world. Why is this? The thing I left out, too obvious, but I should have kept it in. Fear of death. We're the only species that knows it's going to die. Not everyone is completely happy with the idea of checking out and going back to being atoms again. Religion makes the false promise that if you join the right group or make the right prayers or obeisances or propitiations, an exception to this unbreakable rule will be made in your own case. That's obviously nonsense. It's professional lying for profit by priests. But the desire to believe it, the desire to go in for wish thinking, the ability to do that is very great. She wanted to know when I wrote it off. Well, I've already told you. She perhaps wasn't tuned in when we did old Mrs. Watts, Mrs. Jean Watts. But it's more a matter of realizing that I didn't believe it than having believed it and repudiating that. That was, for me, a realization of unbelief rather than a conversion experience. There are, just as we keep on being told, well, but think about how many people are faithful and religious. Well, if that's a point, which I doubt it is, then it must also be a point that there are many, many, many of us who are so constituted that we can't believe this nonsense. It doesn't make any impression on us. It's white noise. It rolls off like water off a duck's back. And we are made in the image of God too, I presume. So he must have wanted at least to be some people who weren't taken in.
Mr. Hitchens, several hundred emails have come in during this show, a lot of them dealing with Iraq, a lot of them dealing with the question of whether or not you would support a war today, knowing what we do know now. And I also would like to get a response to this, which you wrote in 1976 in the New Statesman. Saddam Hussein, who has sprung from being an underground revolutionary gunman to perhaps the first visionary Arab statesman since Nasser.
Yeah. I was in Iraq when he was still the vice president of the country. There was a rather senile president. It was quite clear that this very charismatic character was taking over the Iraqi. I think it was my second visit to Iraq. And I wrote a piece that I think was too uncritical of it, but I don't think was, as a piece of reporting, wrong. I mean, Saddam Hussein did emerge as a very important leader in the Arab world beyond the borders of Iraq. More's the pity. I think at the time, to make a full confession as well, I probably was more influenced than I should have been by the Ba'ath Party's claim to be secular. Well, to the question of if I'd known what we all know now, the answer, of course, still has to be yes, because the argument is not about how well are things going or how well might they go. The question is whether a confrontation with the Saddam Hussein regime is or is not avoidable. And my answer to that question would have to be, no, it was not avoidable. It was, in fact, something that we had put ourselves in a very bad position precisely by trying to avoid in 1991 and subsequently. That there was going to have to be a reckoning, and that it would be better that it be on a time and terms of our choosing than on his, as all the previous confrontations had been. Anyone who says they think the confrontation could have been avoided is just not to be taken seriously.